Section 26 of Villette by Charlotte Bronte. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Leanne Fortune, Section 26. Where my soul went during that swoon, I cannot tell. Whatever she saw, or wherever she travelled in her trance on that strange night, she kept her own secret, never whispering a word to memory, and baffling imagination by an indissoluble silence. She may have gone upward, and come in sight of her eternal home, hoping for leave to rest now, and deeming that her painful union with matter was at last dissolved. While she so deemed, an angel may have warned her away from heaven's threshold, and, guiding her weeping down, have bound her once more, all shuddering and unwilling, to that poor frame, cold and wasted, of whose companionship she was grown more than weary. I know she re-entered her prison with pain, with reluctance, with a moan and a long shiver. The divorced mates, spirit and substance, were hard to reunite. They greeted each other, not in an embrace, but a racking sort of struggle. The returning sense of sight came upon me, red as if it swam in blood. Suspended hearing rushed back loud, like thunder. Consciousness revived in fear. I sat up, appalled, wondering into what region, amongst what strange beings, I was waking. At first I knew nothing I looked on. A wall was not a wall, a lamp not a lamp. I should have understood what we call a ghost, as well as I did the commonest object, which is another way of intimating that all my eye rested on struck it as spectral. But the faculties soon settled, each in his place. The life machine presently resumed its wonted and regular working. Still, I knew not where I was. Only in time I saw I had been removed from the spot where I fell. I lay on no portico step. Night and tempest were excluded by walls, windows, and ceiling. Into some house I had been carried. But what house? I could only think of the pensionnat in the Rue Fossette. Still half dreaming, I tried hard to discover in what room they had put me, whether the great dormitory or one of the little dormitories. I was puzzled, because I could not make the glimpses of furniture I saw accord with my knowledge of any of these apartments. The empty white beds were wanting, and the long line of large windows. Surely, thought I, it is not to Madame Beck's own chamber they have carried me? And here my eye fell on an easy-chair, covered with blue damask. Other seats, cushioned to match, dawned on me by degrees, and at last I took in the complete fact of a pleasant parlour, with a wood fire on a clear shining hearth, a carpet where arabesques of bright blue relieved a ground of shaded fawn, pale walls over which a slight but endless garland of azure forget-me-nots ran mazed and bewildered amongst myriad gold leaves and tendrils. A gilded mirror filled up the space between two windows, curtained amply with blue damask. In this mirror I saw myself laid, not in bed, but on a sofa. I looked spectral, my eyes larger and more hollow, my hair darker than was natural, by contrast with my thin and ashen face. It was obvious, not only from the furniture, but from the position of windows, doors, and fireplace, that this was an unknown room in an unknown house. Hardly less plain was it that my brain was not yet settled, for as I gazed at the blue armchair, it appeared to grow familiar. So did a certain scroll-couch, and not less so the round centre table, with a blue covering, bordered with autumn-tinted foliage, and above all, two little footstools with worked covers, and a small ebony-framed chair, of which the seat and back were also worked with groups of brilliant flowers on a dark ground. Struck with these things, I explored further. Strange to say, old acquaintance were all about me, and auld lang syne smiled out of every nook. There were 2 oval miniatures over the mantelpiece, of which I knew by heart the pearls about the high and powdered heads, the velvet circling the white throats, the swell of the full muslin kerchiefs, the pattern of the lace sleeve ruffles. Upon the mantel-shelf there were 2 china vases, some relics of a diminutive tea-service, as smooth as enamel and as thin as eggshell, and a white centre ornament, a classic group in alabaster, preserved under glass. Of all these things I could have told the peculiarities, numbered the flaws or cracks, like any clairvoyant. Above all, there was a pair of hand-screens, with elaborate pencil drawings, finished like line engravings. These my very eyes ached at beholding again, recalling hours when they had followed, stroke by stroke, and touch by touch, a tedious, feeble, finical schoolgirl pencil held in these fingers, now so skeleton-like. Where was I? Not only in what spot of the world, but in what year of our Lord? For all these objects were of past days, and of a distant country. 10 years ago I bade them good-bye. Since my 14th year they and I had never met. I gasped audibly, "Where am I?" A shape hitherto unnoticed stirred, rose, came forward. A shape inharmonious with the environment, serving only to complicate the riddle further. This was no more than a sort of native bonne, in a commonplace bonne's cap and print dress. She spoke neither French nor English, and I could get no intelligence from her, not understanding her phrases of dialect. But she bathed my temples and forehead with some cool and perfumed water, and then she heightened the cushion on which I reclined, made signs that I was not to speak, and resumed her post at the foot of the sofa. She was busy knitting. Her eyes thus drawn from me, I could gaze on her without interruption. I did mightily wonder how she came there, or what she could have to do among the scenes, or with the days of my girlhood. Still more, I marvelled what those scenes and days could now have to do with me. Too weak to scrutinize thoroughly the mystery, I tried to settle it by saying it was a mistake, a dream, a fever fit, and yet I knew there could be no mistake, and that I was not sleeping, and I believed I was sane. I wished the room had not been so well lighted, that I might not so clearly have seen the little pictures, the ornaments, the screens, the work chair. All these objects, as well as the blue damask furniture, were, in fact, precisely the same, in every minutest detail, with those I so well remembered, and with which I had been so thoroughly intimate, in the drawing-room of my godmother's house at Breton. Methought the apartment only was changed, being of different proportions and dimensions. I thought of bedridden Hassan, transported in his sleep from Cairo to the gates of Damascus. Had a genius stooped his dark wing down the storm to whose stress I had succumbed, and gathering me from the church steps, and rising high into the air, as the Eastern tale said, had he borne me over land and ocean, and laid me quietly down beside a hearth of old England. But no, I knew the fire of that hearth burned before its layers no more. It went out long ago, and the household gods had been carried elsewhere. The bonne turned again to survey me, and, seeing my eyes wide open, and I suppose Deeming their expression perturbed and excited, she put down her knitting. I saw her busied for a moment at a little stand. She poured out water and measured drops from a phial. Glass in hand, she approached me. What dark-tinged draught might she now be offering? What genii elixir or magi distillation? It was too late to inquire. I had swallowed it passively and at once. A tide of quiet thought now came gently caressing my brain. Softer and softer rose the flow, with tepid undulations, smoother than balm. The pain of weakness left my limbs, my muscles slept. I lost power to move, but, losing at the same time wish, it was no privation. That kind bonne placed a screen between me and the lamp. I saw her rise to do this, but do not remember seeing her resume her place. In the interval between the two acts, I fell on sleep. At waking, lo! all was again changed. The light of high days surrounded me, not indeed a warm summer light, but the leaden gloom of raw and blustering autumn. I felt sure now that I was in the pensionnat, sure by the beating rain on the casement, sure by the wather of wind amongst trees, denoting a garden outside, sure by the chill, the whiteness, the solitude, amidst which I lay. I say whiteness, for the dimity curtains drooped before a French bed bounded my view. I lifted them, I looked out. My eye, prepared to take in the range of a long, large, and whitewashed chamber, blinked baffled on encountering the limited area of a small cabinet, a cabinet with sea-green walls. Also, instead of 5 wide and naked windows, there was one high lattice, shaded with muslin festoons, instead of 24 little stands of painted wood, each holding a basin and an ewer. There was a toilette table dressed, like a lady for a ball, in a white robe over a pink skirt. A polished and large glass crowned, and a pretty pincushion frilled with lace adorned it. This toilette, together with a small, low, green and white chintz armchair, a washstand topped with a marble slab and supplied with utensils of pale greenware, sufficiently furnished the tiny chamber. Reader, I felt alarmed. Why, you will ask? What was there in this simple and somewhat pretty sleeping closet to startle the most timid? Merely this: these articles of furniture could not be real, solid armchairs, looking-glasses, and washstands. They must be the ghosts of such articles, or, if this were denied as too wild an hypothesis, and confounded as I was, I did deny it. There remained but to conclude that I had myself passed into an abnormal state of mind; in short, that I was very ill and delirious, and even then mine was the strangest figment with which delirium had ever harassed a victim. I knew, I was obliged to know, the green chintz of that little chair, the little snug chair itself, the carved shining black foliated frame of that glass, the smooth milky green of the china vessels on the stand, the very stand, too, with its top of grey marble, splintered at one corner. All these I was compelled to recognize and to hail, as last night I had, perforce, recognized and hailed the rosewood, the drapery, the porcelain of the drawing-room. Breton! Breton! And 10 years ago shone reflected in that mirror. And why did Breton in my 14th year haunt me thus? Why, if they came at all, did they not return complete? Why hovered before my distempered vision the mere furniture, while the rooms and the locality were gone? As to that pincushion made of crimson satin, ornamented with gold beads and frilled with thread lace, I had the same right to know it as to know the screens. I had made it myself. Rising with a start from the bed, I took the cushion in my hand and examined it. There was the cipher LLB, formed in gold beds, and surrounded with an oval wreath embroidered in white silk. These were the initials of my godmother's name, Lenisa Lucy Breton. Am I in England? Am I at Breton? I muttered, and hastily pulling up the blind with which the lattice was shrouded, I looked out to try and discover where I was. Half prepared to meet the calm, old, handsome buildings and clean grey pavement of St. Anne Street, and to see at the end the towers of the Minster, or, if otherwise, fully expectant of a town view somewhere, a rue in Villette, if not a street in a pleasant and ancient English city. I looked, on the contrary, through a frame of leafage clustering round the high lattice, and forth thence to a grassy mead-like level, a lawn terrace with trees rising from the lower ground beyond, high forest trees, such as I had not seen for many a day. They were now groaning under the gale of October, and between their trunks I traced the line of an avenue where yellow leaves lay in heaps and drifts, or were whirled singly before the sweeping west wind. Whatever landscape might lie further must have been flat, and these tall beeches shut it out. The place seemed secluded, and was to me quite strange. I did not know it at all. End of section 26. Recording by Leanne Fortune.